Welcome to my channel. I'm Mikhaila Fuller. I'm going to cover some recent events because society seems to be shifting fast. The last couple of weeks have been insane. And I decided to put off a podcast this week to cover some politics, and also because I want to do a more political podcast next week about the grooming rape gangs in the UK. So that'll be out next week. For this week, I took questions from you guys on Instagram, and we're going to briefly cover Trudeau, grooming gangs in the UK, Elon Musk. That's probably it. So, starting with this question, why is Trudeau resigning? Huge news for Canadians, and shout out to my dad and Pierre Poilievre for helping this happen, and for Canadians and honestly Americans for the pressure. For anybody who doesn't know, Trudeau is resigning. Why? Canada is in way worse shape than it was when he was elected. You can find online articles saying things have improved, but they haven't. And any Canadian, even people on the left, unless they're completely deluded, will attest to that. COVID was obviously hard for everyone, regardless of who was in charge and where they were, but Trudeau's government took their response to the extreme. I believe Canada was shut down longer than anywhere in the world. Yes, shut down longer than anywhere in the world. It was very frustrating. People couldn't go into restaurants without vaccine IDs. The pressure to get vaccinated was insanely high, and there really wasn't any way out for people without being completely cast out of society, which some people did, and good for them. But it was a hard time. It wasn't okay. Currently, when I go back there from the US, I find it much harder to find things in stores. I think a lot of Canadians aren't aware of actually how difficult it is to live there compared to the US. There's no availability for products. Taxes are insane. In Ontario, they're worse than California, just so Americans get an idea of how bad it is there. The upper income, which isn't even that high, it's about 150K Canadian, which is way less than 150K American, is taxed at 54% in Ontario. It's crazy. People are stressed out. The bills Trudeau was pushing are insane. For instance, and I covered this with Dad on a recent podcast, Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act, even that title is annoying, would have made having conservative views online fall under hate speech, which would have meant people could be jailed for conservative views online, hate speech, similar to what's going on in the UK, where you can be jailed for online posts. So this isn't out of the question. It's like, oh, how can the government introduce a bill like that? It's literally happening in the UK, and they introduced it in Canada. There was Bill S-248, medically assisted death for healthy people. He was pro-surgical transition for minors. So is the Liberal Party still. This wasn't Trudeau alone. Then, personally, he also lied about my dad being funded by Russians under oath, which means he can't even be pursued for defamation. I don't think that was malevolent in nature. I literally think he's dumb. But the fact you can have a world leader casually lie about its citizens under oath is insane. Anyway, the tricky part of this resignation is he prorogued the government until March 25th. So what does that mean? That was another question people had. I knew a little bit about prorogation, but not a lot. So prorogation allows the Prime Minister to pause Parliament. For Americans, Parliament is like Congress. It's also the term used after Parliament closes before it opens, which is usually a very, very short period of time. The government remains in power even during lengthy prorogations, but all parliamentary activity, from existing bills and committee work to studies and investigations, stops. The Prime Minister can ask the Crown to extend that, and for some reason, he was allowed to do that until March 25th. That's a huge pause. What this actually means is that the Liberals will avoid a confidence vote and get more time to run a leadership race. That's it. That's why he paused Parliament. There might be other things going on online saying why he paused Parliament, but he paused Parliament so the Liberals could put in a new leader because people dislike them so much right now. So we couldn't get an election after he stepped down because Pierre Poilievre is beating him so badly in popularity. I don't even know if the Liberal parties would come in second in an election right now. So Trudeau paused Parliament so they can find someone else to lead the Liberals and run against Poilievre, which is completely unethical for Canadians that are stuck under the Liberal government right now. On the other hand, the government's so bad that Because they paused Parliament, they can't push those bills I was talking about through. So that's good, but it's a complete mess. Proroguing has been used by Conservatives in Canada as well. Stephen Harper used prorogation to avoid a confidence vote in 2008, which stopped all three opposition parties trying to defeat his government. So that's what the Liberals are doing now. Another question from Instagram. Who do you think will replace Trudeau, and do you like them? I don't really know who's going to replace Trudeau. I think people are just speculating. I had to do some digging and talk to my dad because I don't know a lot of key players in the Liberal Party other than Trudeau. But it looks like they'll probably elect Mark Carney, maybe. Mark Carney's way smarter than Trudeau, which isn't really saying much. He graduated from Harvard. He was at Goldman Sachs for 13 years. Way better than a high school drama teacher. But his political ideology is the same as Trudeau's. That or Chrystia Freeland, who dad said is worse than Trudeau. So either way, it's not good. I can't think of a Liberal candidate that would be good. Canada needs a Conservative in power right now. They've gone way too far left. I like Pierre. He's a stable, reasonable, sane person and would be good for Canada. And I can't think of a Liberal replacement that would be good at all. Someone else asked, do you think Trudeau resigning will give the Liberals a better chance of winning the next election? Definitely. They pulled a Biden-Kamala Harris swap, basically. We're right in the midst of finding out who Canada's Kamala is. They're going to stick in another Liberal and put that person up against Pierre Poilievre. I've said before, maybe not to you guys, but probably, I've said Canada always follows suit of America politically. I've seen this pattern. Like, I've known about this since I was a kid. It was just like, we're like a couple of years behind what America's doing in style and bad ideas too. America was woke and Canada thought, that seems like a good idea. Let's do that. Like, America was woke first. And now that America has voted in a Republican, Canadians will vote in a Conservative. I wouldn't say it's copying. It just happens that way for some reason. We're very close together. Although this proroguing and switching the Liberal candidate maybe could be classified as copying the Biden-Harris switch. It'll definitely give the Liberals a better shot at winning, but the majority of Canadians don't want them in power, so I don't think it'll make a difference in the end, I hope. Another question was, is Pierre a globalist puppet? So a quick comment on Pierre Poilievre's podcast. I guess more news. Dad put out a podcast with Pierre Poilievre, who's running for prime minister on the Conservative side in Canada, which went completely viral on X. It was something like 31 million impressions. It was higher than that. That was when I checked. Right before Trudeau resigned, that was released. Then he resigned. Liberal MPs came out of the woodwork immediately to say it was funded by Russia because they can't imagine what it would be like to have a different perspective from them without being paid for it. But is Pierre a globalist puppet? I don't think so. He voted, in my opinion, wrong a few times regarding a few bills that were definitely mistakes. One was Bill C-4, which banned conversion therapy, which sounds more reasonable, but they had amended the bill. So it was passed unanimously and now makes it illegal for parents to fight against this trans ideology because it's under this banning of a conversion bill. So if their kid comes and says they're trans, because of Bill C-4, technically parents can't do anything legally to stop it, and it's criminal to try to stop it. This was voted on in 2021, and that was before Canadians, for sure, the majority of Canadians knew how evil this trans ideology was. I knew. Dad obviously knew. He's been talking about it since 2016. You guys might have known. But even the Conservatives voting on a let's ban conversion therapy bill in Canada, I don't think they were aware of how terrible the bill was. They should have been. And people have the right to be up in arms about it because it's a terrible bill. So there are criticisms of Poilievre floating around the internet. But I do believe Poilievre says what he means when he says he's for parental rights. And I don't think he'll make any of those errors again. I think a lot of people in Canada, especially after COVID and when kind of the news around vaccines having side effects, etc., came out, I think people are so much further right than they were in 2021 that they're not going to fall for the same shenanigans. Shenanigans is a very nice way of putting what the woke left was doing. My parents know his family pretty well, and him and his wife are like super normal. They're not crazy connected at political levels like the globalist puppets you might be thinking of. I think he's just a sane guy who wants to help Canada. And I think he's tough. And I think out of anyone in Canada, he's a formidable opponent for the woke left. Time will tell, but I would vote for him. If Canadians don't rally behind this guy, I am concerned the Liberals will swap in someone and try to win again. And there are plenty of people in Canada that would still vote Liberal. Like totally woke, brainwashed people that don't know anything, that are still listening to mainstream news. It's bad. There are a lot of people like that in Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver. So I'd say get behind Pierre Poilievre and make a fuss about him, because if Conservatives don't win the next election, Canada is going to end up like the UK with jail time for social media posts. And worst case, apparently Pakistani grooming and rape gangs, which I will address in a podcast soon and maybe right now. Yeah. So this is horrible. Speaking of the grooming gangs, if you guys aren't aware, because it hasn't been covered very much other than on X, Elon went nuts. The last couple weeks, he's been going ham. Do people still say that? Anyway, if you don't know what's been going on, there's been a huge uncovering of Pakistani Muslim rape gangs that apparently has been covered in the Times in the UK years ago. Toby Robinson has been speaking about it. Other people have been talking about it too and trying to get people to pay attention, but it didn't flood all over social media, and I don't think news of it really got widespread until Elon Musk last week. The details are really bad. There are transcripts that are available on X from the court cases of what these people did to, generally speaking, poor British underage girls, and it's stopped me from sleeping for a number of days. It's so awful. I can't believe people aren't taking torches to the streets in the UK right now. I'm talking about tens of thousands. The number 250,000 has been thrown around. Now, a lot of people on the left are like, that's too many. That's not what's going on. But I don't know. That could be what's going on. These are underage girls between 9, 14, and they're being groomed and then sodomized, raped, drugged, and brutalized by multiple Pakistani men. And I'm saying Pakistani men in the UK because that's who's doing it. So there's no point in avoiding describing who people are. If there were a group of white men that were doing this, I'm sure people would hopefully throw them in jail for the rest of their lives, and that would be the best case scenario for them because they deserve worse, right? But that's who's doing it in the UK. The court transcripts will give any sane person nightmares. I'm going to cover it on my podcast in greater detail, but apparently these gangs will approach girls in low-income areas of the UK as young as 9 who are alone after school and befriend them and then eventually drug and rape them. And like I said, gangs of grown men drugging and repeatedly raping British girls. And it's not like one or two people, it's a lot of people. Apparently this has been going on for 30 years and is getting worse with immigration in the UK. There's a class problem in the UK, there always has been, where upper class looks down on the lower class. So a number of these girls, when they went to the police, would be called sluts and turned away. There's one story of a girl going to the police, being turned away, and then someone picks her up outside and rapes her again. I'm not sure how 12-year-olds can consent to 5 men having sex with them when they're on drugs and alcohol. It's disgusting. So Elon blew it up on X, put a ton of international pressure on the British government, and they had a vote to determine whether or not there would be a national inquiry into these rapes. And they voted almost 400 to 100 people. No. So there's not going to be a national inquiry. That's the UK's version of the Liberal Party doing that. It's absurd. Anybody who voted against that inquiry should be behind bars. Who does that? Apparently, the police involved have been scared to talk about these cases for fear of being called Islamophobic. The British government knew about this and has been covering it up because they need the Muslim vote in the UK and didn't want to make the Muslim population angry. Or at least that's how it appears from what I know now. Can you imagine wanting to win so badly you wouldn't stand up for a 12-year-old girl who's being raped repeatedly? It sounds like it's out of a storybook. It's so evil. So Elon, like I said, went ham, and people on the left and the woke right are upset he's getting involved in UK politics. And honestly, my opinion is deport. And that's the nicest thing you can do, is deport anyone involved. even peripherally, even if you were the groomer and not the raper, even if you were the drugger and not the raper, even if you knew about it, honestly, deport anyone involved, even peripherally, and jail anyone that's from the UK who's been covering it up forever. And then blaming Elon for getting involved when the UK government didn't fix this problem out of fear. Anyway, like I said, the last couple of weeks of like things erupting and conflict, even amongst the right, there's been a lot going on. It's crazy. We're like 2025 is going to be such a calm year, and then things just blew up in the first 2 weeks. It's wild. Yeah, do I have anything more to say about that? Not really, I suppose. I'm going to cover it more in the podcast, but Elon's done the world a service uncovering this. We'll cover the woke right that I mentioned in another clip. Left-wingers spent the last decade not outing the woke leftists that eventually destroyed their entire party. I'm not about to be the conservative, which apparently I am. I've never been like, I'm a hyper-conservative because, well, I'm not, but I would put myself in the conservative party now. But I'm not going to point out the woke right, which I think is a fair name for them. I don't have another name for them yet. Those people that are popping up, they're just as gross as the woke left. But we'll touch on that later. I'm sure that'll make a lot of people angry. Yeah, that should alienate me from a bunch of people, but I would happily be alienated from them. So another question I had was, do you think Elon is overstepping? Does he have a thirst for power and control? From the limited, it's not like I know Elon Musk. So I don't think so. I don't think he has a thirst for power and control, or if he does, I trust him more than any other billionaire and like more than most people from what he's done in the past. People can always change, but my opinion right now is that he has the concerns any reasonable person has, and he saved free speech basically by buying X, and he's brilliant. He's obviously concerned about trans ideology, grooming rape gangs in the UK. Anyone not concerned about that, I don't even have words to describe those people. He's concerned about woke politics. He helped Trump win. He has more money than anyone in the entire world. He already has power that way, and he came by it by working and being brilliant. He doesn't need more power. I don't think he's done anything that shows that he has some concerning thirst for power, right? I don't think what he's going off after is power. Some of the response to his Neuralink has been negative, which definitely makes sense because it's so new and so crazy. But right now, those are getting used for spinal cord injuries. So I think people making a fuss about them could maybe consider the fact they've improved the lives dramatically of people with spinal cord injuries. Like that's a revolutionary medical device. And I might be a bit more sensitive to that from being previously disabled, but not everything new is bad. I haven't heard anybody who could benefit from a Neuralink implant complaining about his implants. Just serious right-wingers saying he's trying to make transhumans. So I don't think that's what he's after. I think he's just trying to make the world a better place. And isn't it kind of nice to have a billionaire on the conservative side? Maybe he's not quite conservative enough for some conservatives, but who wants to be that conservative anyway? There's a nice middle ground. Like there's this huge middle area of politics that people could be in and get along pretty well. There's no reason to be on these outskirts. After 10 years of being bombarded by woke leftists, it's not surprising that people are like swinging to the other side, but I don't think we need to swing all the way to the other side. We don't have to go like back and forth. We could just go to sanity. I'm happy with where Trump and RFK land on the political spectrum. Anyway, I think that covers some updates. Yeah, I'm done for today. I'll have a podcast for you guys again next week, hopefully on the disastrous rape of Britain, where I'll be talking to someone who knows way more about it than me. So that should be dark, but I think it would be a good episode for people to watch because that could be anywhere. That's not like a UK thing. That could be anywhere. And so we have to be prepared for that and know that it can happen and figure out how to make sure it doesn't happen. So thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you guys soon.